to light to be revealed with eloquence forever flowing fearless. Hello, welcome to another Fearless QA. We are live, we're streaming live from Boulder, Colorado. And I've got with me Max Lenderman. Bunch of people have been asking me, you gotta have masks on, you have to have Max on. And this went on for a long time. And Art was telling me, "What, you gotta have Max on," my assistant. And finally, and I was still at Crispin, I think. And I was like, who the fuck is Max Lenderman? and then I realized he kind of worked for us. So, and I realized a lot of other things about him. Max has got several books out, right?
Yeah.
3?
Two.
One
in the works.
All right, so 3.
Yeah.
2.5 books.
Yeah.
And is very celebrated in the area of experiential marketing. So we're doing a show today all about experiential marketing. We probably will wind up talking about other crap too, because that's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
And it's our show, and we get to talk about whatever we want, but we're going to talk a lot about that. I have Max's bio.
Oy.
And I thought I would start
Oy.
by, you let this out, man.
Embarrassing.
You put it out into the world. Max Lenderman is director of Outer Active at Crispin Porter and Bogusky. Never heard of him.
No.
The agency has more than $1 billion in billings. Sounds good. And one of the most awarded agencies in the world. That's impressive. He's a former executive creative director at GMR Marketing, the largest experiential marketing company in North America, where his work won a ton of awards, FEs, you know how we like to give each other awards. Apparently Max was in the Peace Corps, where he drilled wells, like deep water wells. What kind of stuff were you doing?
70, 80 meters, hand percussion.
Okay,
yeah.
For water or oil?
For water.
Okay, yeah. Cool. And in Chad.
Yeah.
And worked, here's the best part of your, this is the best part of your, I've never seen anything like this in a biography. He's contributed frequently, I can't speak, I'm sorry, to youth lifestyle magazines such as High Times and Hemperer. So he burns it. That seems to me. And now I know why Crispin was able to lure Max to Boulder, Colorado.
That's right. That's right. 80,000 medical marijuana users cannot be wrong.
So are you, let's start there, because it's where we're at.
Right.
Are you a proponent of marijuana use?
I am medically, sure. I have 2 little kids, so I can't, you don't
dose them?
Yeah, not yet.
Good.
Not yet. But, I do think that from a cultural perspective and just from a medical perspective and a social perspective, I think it's something that people are allowed to do.
You know that 411 celebration? Is it 411? It's 401, right? What's it called? Come on, help me.
420?
420, sorry.
Yeah.
420.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
Were you there last year?
I wasn't.
No.
The first time I was at a 420 was in New York City. And now that was a mind-blowing experience.
And do you want to explain to people what 420 stands for?
Well, apparently it's the international code for sliding up.
No, it's the charge. It's a 420.
Oh, is that what it is? If they write it up for
So this sort of like a mass 420 happens, then I guess the police don't have enough paperwork.
They don't have enough paper.
Yeah,
right.
to actually fulfill all the orders for 420s, so they just let it go.
That's a good call. That's good.
Yeah. So, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, man.
Didn't mean to really start with that.
It's all right. Mom, Dad, it's all good. Don't worry about it.
Now, have you ever is that in your bio too?
What the High Times?
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to be a journalist.
Yeah.
And I was literally looking for as many gigs as I possibly could. And a buddy of mine who I played in a band with actually, from a really random circumstance, became the publisher of High Times. And he was the most anti-pot smoker, punk rock, New York East Village guy
like a straight edge guy.
Yeah, I mean, he did his whiskey and he did his other things.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was just a weird coincidence that he became the publisher. And I was a marketing journalist at that time. So he brought me on and said, how do we market pot? We don't want to be really a niche magazine anymore. We have Ozzy Osbourne on the cover or whatever, And so he kind of brought me in. And
that's what made me think of the 420, because that's sort of experiential marketing
it kind
for
of is.
pot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the more you do it, the more you do the 420 celebration, the more it kind of gets mainstream and accepted in culture.
Well, and also, you know, maybe some people go and they're like, I've never had pot.
Right. But this parade is awesome.
And these people are so nice.
Yeah, totally. Why is everyone hungry?
Everyone's so happy. I like pot.
Pot's great.
Yeah. So
it was a good, you know, it was a really good opportunity to look at something from a completely different perspective, not from as a frequent or infrequent user.
So is that how you got into marketing? Is through
through journalism?
Through journalism.
Yeah. My first taste of marketing, I was actually working for a magazine called Beverage World back in like mid '90s, and the whole trade magazine, yeah. And the whole craft beer thing came up, like Red Tail and all those, and I got that beat. I was go cover the craft brewing thing,
right?
And I realized that they had no money, right? So their whole entire marketing platform was tastings and the story behind the beer, and it was really sort of experiential. You go to these events and everyone's lined up and you have a little cup and you drink beer and there you go.
Yeah, I assumed that you were like a street teamer, that you started as a street teamer and then you sort of parlayed that into...
the real way it came about was I had a internet company in Montreal that I started with 3 other partners, and in '99 the bottom fell out, and we were doing a lot of events to market our internet company on college campuses. And our first client was Dentine Gum. And they came to us and said, we're not going to buy banner ads anymore, but we have 500,000 samples, and you guys are doing a concert. Can you hand that out?
Right.
And we said, sure, we'll pay the bills. And it actually started like that. I did hand stuff out, for about a year.
So a failed career in journalism,
a
failed career in the internet, and you become an experiential marketer.
Yeah, here I am.
It's pretty much what happened to me. Is I tried to do all sorts of stuff, but then had to fall back into working in a studio and an agency.
Well, and you're hoping that the times or the circumstances around it are favorable, and they were favorable to me. Experiential was coming up, and people didn't really know what it was, and I figured why not.
And you obviously kind of got into it too.
I got into it.
Yeah.
I got into it.
You saw it happening, and you're like, wow, this is interesting. And it wasn't something where you just thought, oh, I could make money at this. You obviously have a lot of passion for it.
Definitely, and I was getting dates too. It was a great way to meet girls. And it was one of those things where you can actually go out.
Are you married now?
I am
or are
married.
those 2 kids with some of the girls that you met?
Are you watching this? It's not me. No, but it was one of those things where you would come back from a show or an event or a street festival or whatnot, and you felt good because, granted, you gave away something, but you kind of gave something back. It wasn't just a one-way thing, so it was just fun.
Yeah, it's not just, hey, we've got you captive here, so we're going to blast a message.
Exactly.
There is this exchange.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we had a great fortune of knowing up-and-coming bands. I was living in Montreal, and the whole Montreal music scene was blowing up. So we would, give these bands the opportunity to play a street festival and it'd be sponsored by someone. Yeah. And it was great to get to know them, and they were very happy about it now as well. Hey, you guys are paying me $500 to play a show. Great.
Yeah. So what are your rules about what makes a good experience?
Benefits probably the first one. You can't take away from people's lives. Living in New York City, I've always seen sampling campaigns right before you get on the L train, right outside like the train station.
Is a sampling campaign experiential marketing?
I think it's the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think only from the sense that it's a physical thing, not a hyperbole. It's a real world thing.
Right.
So I guess that's where it kind of starts into it. But also, it gives you the opportunity to have people make up their mind on their own.
Right.
You just give them the product, or you show it to them, have them hold it.
Right.
And it kind of works for that.
But who gives it to them, and that exchange that happens, that's where it probably becomes more than sampling.
Well, that's where the art is. I mean,
because sampling could be done through the mail, I guess.
Absolutely.
Pure sampling.
Sampling. Or probably the best efficiencies too.
Could be thrown from an airplane.
Yeah.
Remember WKRP in Cincinnati?
Sure, the turkeys.
When they threw the turkeys out of the helicopter?
I know turkeys can fly.
Oh, the humanity.
No, but you bring up a good point, is that the people who are giving that sample are really the experiential part. It's not really the product, and it's not really the act of giving. Right. It's who's giving it and how they're doing it.
There was a thing I read, and I think it was your first book, and you had someone working for you, and she started to explain to you how experiential marketing really is the same thing as making a friend.
Exactly.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it probably is a little bit too simplistic now, but back then it totally made a lot of sense. You know, it's you hear about someone, you're in a dorm room, you hear about someone like, oh, you like Tribe Called Quest or whatever. Someone likes Tribe Called Quest. Like, boom, there's a connection then, and then you meet them on the street, and then you have a great experience, and then you go to the show, and it's even a better experience, and now you're best friends. You know, so it's kind of that same, I guess, progression of you're not pushing, you're just hoping that people like you and want to connect with you.
And when she told you that's now where is she now? The girl that told
who
you
knows?
that
She's
story?
somewhere in Montreal. I hope she's doing great.
She's not the CEO of.
She very well could be. She very well could be of some big company.
I was curious if you like snatched her out of the,
I did. Well, back in those days, and still to this day, you know, from
So you were
street
just like,
team
hey,
perspective.
thanks. I'm gonna put this in my book. Good luck.
Well, we were drinking at the time, and I said, "Can I use this in my book?" I don't know if she remembers, but I ran home and wrote it down. But that's how a lot of people start in experiential marketing as street team people.
Right.
You know, and enough people tell you to go fuck yourself. You know, you start changing your pitch. You know, so it's a great way to learn on the fly.
You learn
as
what
well.
works.
Yeah.
What is a good way to get people to say go fuck yourself? I mean, that might be a good place to
I mean,
start
that
because
is a
there's
really good
people
place.
out there and they're charged with creating some interaction, and they might write a script that you would know is totally wrong. Like,
Right.
what are the things that you look for?
Well, I think the first thing is not giving a shit.
And when I say a script, I don't mean a television script. I mean
Like an interaction script.
An interaction script.
Yeah. I think if no matter what's written, if you don't give a shit, nothing's going to get done. And there's a certain amount of empathy that needs to occur.
You mean if the
person is just like,
person.
I'm just here for my $12 an hour.
So recruiting is something we should talk about, probably.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And you know, and recruiting is a lot of people, especially when you do nightlife events, for instance, you know, bars and stuff like that. You go straight for the physical. You know, she looks hot. He looks great. He looks good in the uniform. You know. What was that? Johnny Bravo was that the Brady Bunch? When he looks good in the uniform, you'll be the rock star. But a lot of times those are the kind of the worst because they're all about themselves and how they look and or the money that they're getting and whatnot. Whereas the people who truly want to engage and talk and go beyond just the actual physical giving, those are the ones that really stand out.
Right.
Yeah.
And why do they want that? They just want it. They just want it.
Yeah, I think people,
Do you think I'd be good as a street team kid?
I think you would.
I wouldn't.
You don't think so?
No, I would hate it.
Really?
I don't. Yeah, I tend to shy from people. But anyway, I just was curious.
Well, that's what makes a creative director though.
I would be terrified of the idea that I have to like walk up and hand somebody something.
I
have a lot of compassion for people who do it. You know, it's I tend to like be really friendly and take a sample and talk, just because I feel like, God, if you're mean to them, it's gonna ruin their day. And it probably does. Is it ruining their day?
Well, it depends.
All right, so if you get someone sampling, it's really the right thing to do to engage and buy whatever they're selling.
That's
key.
But you know what? I got to tell you, I disagree with you. Because I know that you're certainly passionate about some things, right? Because experiential certainly doesn't have to be a physical sample; it could be just word of mouth.
You could take like B-Cycle. You could take the thing I'm most passionate about, bike sharing, and ask me to do it, and I don't want to meet new people. I just don't want to,
But you're an evangelist, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, but not that kind. It's always great that there's different kinds of people, because if there was only one, we'd all be
screwed.
Yeah, we'd all be screwed.
Yeah, totally.
I got probably as many questions as we've ever gotten on a show.
Wow.
So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
It's very cool. One of the questions that I thought was good is, why are there so many super smart, great Canadians making a big impact in the ad biz? You're Canadian.
I've paid enough taxes to be Canadian. I was born in Russia, but I lived a ton in Canada. I think the reason is, for some reason, Canadians are self-effacing, and you have to kind of lose yourself a little bit if you're going to be in the public eye, or put yourself out there in a sense that being among other people that you don't know, and that self-effacement.
I didn't know that there were many Canadians making a big impact, though, other than you.
Well, or in the NHL, but
comedians.
Oh, true. That's true.
All the funniest people on earth are Canadian.
Maybe there's a thing about that too. Where it's like you have to kill a little bit of yourself in order to be funny. You can't take it personally.
Right, you got to really strip yourself down.
Exactly.
And,
maybe that's what maybe that's what it is. And I think
it makes sense for where advertising is going right now. The Canadians would actually surge, because where advertising is going is you're gonna do better the more transparency you can offer.
Agreed.
So that idea of tearing yourself down.
Agreed.
And just essentially having really honest conversations.
Yeah.
That's
no pretenses, no chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
You are who you are.
Yeah.
And Canadians love their
France
pride.
probably won't surge.
Probably not so much.
Canada is going to take off.
Definitely.
America may stumble.
I think America will, but you know what? The great thing about Americans is the melting pot component of us.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no way to know what an American is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you do have that element of empathy that you can probably carry over into the work.
There was a question that came that just seems to come right out of there. Is there any way traditional agencies will ever understand that rural America isn't different from rural India or China? I don't even know what it means. I love this question.
You know what? Let me try to answer it.
Okay.
There absolutely isn't, and the sense of it, and if you look at it globally, is that most of the world is poor, and really poor.
Yeah.
4 billion people live on less than $2 a day. So to get that 10% of that $2 a day as a marketer really takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
So maybe it's that component where you really have to be convinced. You just don't take anything at face value. If you've grown up knowing that nothing comes easy.
If they have $2 a day, don't you want to just leave them with their $2?
That was a huge. Someone asked me that, and I had no idea how to answer it. They said, "Why would you take a part of that $2 away?"
It seems like if it's $2, just
yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. But at the same time, they need products, they need services to break out of that $2 a day.
Right.
Like a cell phone.
Right.
Or a cow,
Right.
or whatever, gets you to $4, or it gets you to $6.
Right.
So maybe you do need those things.
Hey.
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 Doing a show?
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on in. No, it's perfect because you work in experiential marketing, correct? You're really tall. I
So
don't know if
maybe on the show?
can you get can you
Go
come
sit
in?
down. I do.
Rob,
Max,
how you doing?
pleasure to meet you.
I think I'll
He's very
just-
tall.
I am tall.
Hey,
I
you are
think-
Here,
tall.
do you want
I bang
crotch
apples
or
all the time.
ass?
I'll take
All
that.
right, another Fearless show.
Yeah, this is your second show, Rob.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Fearless. Rob Schuham from AMG Marketing. Can you see him? Is it working? Yeah, scoot in this way
Scoot
a little
in.
bit, Rob.
Scoot in.
This is
Yeah.
television. It doesn't look like you're uncomfortably close together.
All right.
Yeah.
And we want to get more experiential right
Yeah,
now.
let's
Very
get
experiential.
Spiritual,
You
all of
experience
it.
each other's thighs
It's true.
for the rest of the show.
Nice ink.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All we want to experience putting that
So
out.
what were we talking about before we were so rudely interrupted?
Taking $2 away from the poorest people
yeah.
in the world. Yeah.
If people make $2 a day, is it ethical to do any kind of marketing?
Yeah, because we could probably get $1.99 out of them if we tried hard.
Jesus.
No, it's probably not that ethical.
I mean, it is curious though. Just the I mean, they're not paying for the marketing. So your point is, if there's products that can lift them out of poverty, like a cell phone, could anyone get a cell phone that makes $2?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. In India, that's the number one thing that they're marketing to the hinterland. There's no TV, there's no radio.
Yeah.
There's like 600 million people in India that live in the boonies.
Right.
Their only way to communicate is through the cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they do is a village buys one phone.
Yeah.
And they kind of share it among each other. And then the top farmers that use it the most kind of bring back to the community, and it becomes the hub of the village.
Yeah. You've done a lot of you've done some writing about BRIC countries,
Yeah.
and that's probably something worth explaining to folks. Like, what is BRIC? What's that all about?
BRIC is an acronym. Goldman Sachs. It's a marketing term for Goldman Sachs for that stands for Brazil, Russia, India, and China.
And so you can lump them all together.
You could lump them all together. They're all the same. Russians and Indians, the same exact guys.
Yeah.
But it's basically saying that the world economy is going to be fueled by those countries in the next 20, 25 years. The problem is that everyone's poor in those countries, so every marketer is trying to figure out, well, they're going to be the engine, but how do you add the gas to that engine?
So one of the interesting aspects of the rise of the BRIC countries is trends that are coming out of those countries, I think. Right?
Yeah.
And you probably see that in your work. I don't know if you see it in your work, but it used to be that the Americas and Europe really created all the global trends, and that, is that still the case, or what's happening?
I think it's changing quite rapidly, and I think the trends are coming from those countries in the sense that we just talked about. The majority of the world takes cues from the poor end of the spectrum than from the richer end of the spectrum, and so they never had the luxury of 60 years of mainstream traditional advertising. Right. They're kind of like starting. I wouldn't call it from scratch. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably that luxury. Yeah, it's probably a mainstay of it. But they're just totally like jumping ahead. They're totally skipping that huge step of commercialism and going into something that really is to take my 10% or 10 cents out of my $2. You really got to convince me. And a spot might not do that. Or so you really got to show rather than tell. And so all the kind of trends that are coming out are somewhat experientially based, in the sense that people need to know about this product and feel it and touch it.
But I imagine that experiential marketing existed, you guys would know more, in the US prior to radio and network TV, right? I mean, there was a point where I don't know whether that all marketing was handled by the newspaper, right? Wasn't there a lot of experiential marketing?
I mean, go back to antique advertising days, and circuses and flea circuses, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all about experience and branded experience for sure. Just to switch it back to BRIC countries, something you said a little bit earlier, which is interesting, is we've done some work in China, and I was with the NBA in China, one of our clients, and we started to study China as a market to see kind of what happens from an experiential standpoint there. And one of the things that the NBA wants to do is take what we're doing in the U.S. and start to sort of export that thinking into China. We're already there. And then just to kind of give you a sense of scale on what's going on there, just purely from an NBA perspective, a playoff, an NBA playoff in the U.S., for example, particularly this last playoff, which was fairly high profile, you might do about 15 to 17 million viewers in a country of 300 million. In China, which is a country of billions, of course, a Yao Ming game, regular season, when he was playing, did 400 million in viewership.
So why do you need experiential marketing? Why not just do a TV? So it sounds like a good reason to do TV.
And the NBA has been great about acquiring broadcast rights all over China. The problem is that there's no grassroots behind it. So you have a generation that's watching it on TV. You don't necessarily have a generation that's really experiencing it and experiencing it the way kids in the U.S. experience it.
They don't get connected to it.
There's no cultural connection to it other than to sort of watch it. There's certainly national pride, but what it's not doing is it's not driving into sort of the youth market.
So you're being asked by the NBA, but if I was an advertiser in China, I might say, well, I don't need that level. I just need eyeballs, and there's 400 million watching this game.
Right.
I'm good.
Which is great, but then does it really have a meaningful relationship, with people on an individual basis? So you'll get eyeballs, but how valuable are the eyeballs?
I'm just going to challenge, challenging experiential marketing a little bit. Like, what if I just don't want, it's bad enough that I have to watch a television commercial, perhaps. Now I've got someone handing me something, right? You could argue that that's more invasive. Now I was over at the park and we were having a nice day, and then someone's thrusting something at me.
Right. The keychain that you didn't want.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think
it's
that goes
brand rape or something.
Right. And it's totally getting.
We probably shouldn't use that phrase.
We're brand rapists.
Brand rapists.
Add that to all the hemp stuff on your. Geez.
Yeah, but what the difference is? I think a couple of big differences is you can go tell that person to go fuck themselves. Right there. You can't, you can scream at the TV or you can DVR it out. But you can't really say, and if that person...
But then I wouldn't want that.
I know, but you're a nice guy.
But also my heart rate got elevated.
Right, but that person who was told that could go back to their campaign manager and say, you know what, we shouldn't do it at this park.
Yeah.
No one likes us here. Let's do it somewhere else.
Right.
So you have that a little bit of a dialogue that you probably wouldn't have before.
Yeah, and then when you're on TV, you don't really get that feedback. No one likes us.
You could be, unless you're Elvis and you can shoot your TVs, you can't really do that.
It's like I'm watching the Tour de France and there's only 3 commercials on that I can tell,
Right.
And it's the same 3.
Right.
And at some point you're just like, listen, are you out of your mind? Like anyone who watches the Tour de France watches the whole Tour de France, and now I've seen the commercial a trillion times.
Yeah.
And although I liked it the first time, I hate it now.
Yeah.
I think you have to take down the Versus sales department.
Yeah, but you know the China thing about the TV is a lot of times in China, you know, it's state controlled television. So the messages that you receive as you're a 19-year-old Chinese kid, you probably have a pretty healthy distrust of the messages you receive because of the fact that you know it's coming from the Politburo. You know, whereas if you have a conversation, for instance, on the playing field, the ballpark, you probably don't have that certain amount of censorship.
Yeah.
You know, you probably think that someone's watching you, but you still have that a little bit more credibility in the live space than you probably would, you know, in the TV space there.
It's interesting. I got a question here, and I don't know if it has much to do with what we're talking about, but I liked it, and I didn't know if it was true. Someone said that Brazil had banned outdoor advertising.
Sao Paulo did.
Okay, so it's not the whole country.
No, Sao Paulo did. They banned every single billboard. And they equated it. Listen, it's pretty awesome.
It is awesome. Every place that you go to in America where you're like, why do I love this town? You know, it's so nice. It happens like in Vermont. It happens, and then you realize, oh, there's no outdoor advertising.
Yeah,
it's a really good.
You might actually feel naked in Sao Paulo without all those billboards.
Well, I would.
Yeah, you never know.
No, I think I'd like it.
No, but they actually, when they took the billboards down, they found all these favelas, these barrios that they had no idea existed because they were hiding behind the billboards.
Wow.
And all these new services came about because they were like, oh my God, there's another million people we had no idea about.
Wow.
And they equate it to air pollution. They call it mental pollution. You know, so like when you walk around, it's the same thing as air pollution. And the mayor basically said, this is bad for our health, right? We're done with it. And when I was there, I was talking to a bunch of Palistanos, and they were like, you know what? It's totally true. Like, we're walking down the street, and without the Coke billboards, we have a juice on the street from the local vendor instead of going into the bodega, you know, and getting a Coke.
That's what it's got to be a boon to your business.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Office in Brazil. Do you have an office in Brazil?
No, but
You need one.
scouting one out.
For the World Cup,
right
the World
now.
Cup now, you need one. Totally.
Yeah.
And then, you know, to who is it? JC Decaux, who's like one of the largest, and you might find this interesting because what they do is they say, don't ban our billboards because we're going to provide public bicycle services.
They trade the Paris system they put in.
Yeah, which is like, okay, we're.
So are they still in Sao Paulo?
No, they're not in Sao Paulo. They're in Paris and Bordeaux, and they're trying to do it in Moscow now or something like that.
Right.
But it's pretty outrageous.
What they started with was toilets.
Is that right?
So the first trade was they made those toilets. You know, those freestanding like Parisian street
toilets?
toilets?
the money toilets?
Yeah. That was the first kind of swap.
See?
Yeah.
Everyone needs to poo.
You bring up a great point, you know, and sort of coming off the whole notion of brand rape. Which is really the whole kind of notion
or assault. Maybe it's
can we
assault.
say that?
Yeah, let's say assault.
It's hard to say that word. But the whole notion of advertising and messaging being intrusive, you know, and I think the word for years was interrupt. And obviously Sao Paulo had a backlash, which I think is really interesting. And I think if you go back to experiential, you know, we were also about the same thing. How do we disrupt? You know, how do we get in the way of the consumer, and how do we just, you know, how do we sort of, you know, really to a certain extent.
You took that traditional mindset.
Well, how do we ruin their everyday life? You know, I mean, I think that's
just
really,
in little ways.
I think the ones who do it really poorly are just kind of in the business of ruination of your sort of general way of being in life.
Yeah.
Good point.
And I think what's powerful to do instead is to turn your brand into kind of a useful utility, something that actually adds value. And I think that's where, you know, sort of the next phase of experiential is. And some of it's being done really well right now, and some of it's still awful. But I just think it's really important to recognize that.
I get that too. But sometimes the connections are so tenuous, you know, because you're given brands that, like, I don't know exactly how to make someone's life better, right? And, like you were talking about a shaving one. What was that?
That Gillette Uncut series.
Gillette Uncut.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like, okay, raising, you shave.
It's an oxymoron.
If you do it well, you don't get cut. It's uncut. We'll sponsor these uncut moments.
Yeah.
It's pretty tenuous.
Yeah, a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
It's basically a wordplay that allows you to do something experiential.
Right.
How do you keep yourself and your teams from falling into that? Because I see that as a really common pitfall. Yeah. So let's start with you.
I mean, it's a great question, and it comes down to creativity. You know, it comes down to insights and thinking, and it's not taking the easy way. You know, not taking a word and being like, but films are uncut, and we can do that. Yeah. You know, the corollary to that is what Schuham did in Times Square, where they, you know, they did a public bathroom during the holidays.
We're on pooping.
So we're on pooping. Let's keep going. Right. But you know, they could have done.
I read about that one.
They could have done something soft, and they could have been beds in Times Square, or they could have done something with, you know. I don't know. I don't want to go into buttholes or whatever. Right. But they basically made it.
Too late.
That sounded weird.
Too late.
But they made a public bathroom, and so it was. I think the more literal you get, probably the more experiential it becomes.
And also closer in. It's like it's toilet paper. You know, let's not lie about what it's used for.
Right. Exactly.
And so I thought that one was brilliant. You're at a concert. The worst thing about being at a concert is there's going to be those rows of porta potties. You're afraid some of your friends are going to tip you over while you're in it. There's a lot of bad things that can happen if you step into one of those, right? And then you've got this Schuham trailer that's got, I mean, it sounded like, you know, parquet floors and air conditioned, and there's a 20-minute wait for the Schuham.
A tip bowl with little peppermint patties and stuff like that.
So when you're done with that and you've had a glorious poop, right? Yeah. And you're a concert goer, and it's really outstripped any expectations you had for poops at that venue. Do you take Schuham with you later? Do you say, okay, that's my brand
I think you
because
make
of that?
inextricable link between poop and Schuham. I mean, you just can't separate it anymore.
You think it's just you've created a good memory?
It's like a Pavlovian response now. Poop Schuham.
That was awesome.
I mean,
you got a point. I mean, it is Pavlovian in the sense that you have a memory associated to it. You may have or may have not taken a picture of it. Yeah. You know, and the next show that Schuham isn't there, you're thinking to yourself, man, I wish Schuham was here. Yeah. And the moment you say that, then you're kind of like, you've made that connection already. Might not translate exactly at the store.
Getting into the store, that's the thing. Yeah, then you're in the store and, you know, something's a nickel cheaper.
Yeah, you know, the only thing...
I mean, I remember when we did Subservient Chicken, people were like, well, how does that translate? And you know, it's really the same thing with a commercial. Like, you make somebody laugh and then somehow you expect that to translate into an affinity that then pays for itself later. It's all tenuous. So I'm not suggesting that there's a way to really...
But you could, I mean, their experiential does have the component of shopper marketing involved in it, like a retailtainment or whatever you want to call it. So if you did want to, if you had the budgets, and Procter & Gamble in Schuham's case, you know, decided to push that forward, there could have been a connection to an exit sampling of that concert. You could have gotten a coupon. I mean, I know that's kind of like so base and ridiculous, but like maybe you do have that connection to retail.
Yeah, and I think they fell short maybe of digitizing the experience.
I think that's really, where we need to segue now, because that's really the revolution that's happening now.
Yeah, and that's obviously all coming together, and you know that very well. You know, what I would have done in those Schuham booths had I been a really bad marketer and I wanted to digitize it, is I would have turned the toilets into a photo marketing experience. You know, take a picture of yourself on a poop, you get 2.5 viewership on, you know, something like eShots, and you know, pretty soon your poop is viral. Yeah. And, you know,
pictures of the poop or pictures of the people? I'm just trying to understand your idea.
I would do it, you sitting on the toilet holding your Schuham, right?
Jesus. I think as soon as there's a camera in there, I'm much less comfortable about the whole idea.
Obviously.
I know you're just kidding.
But that is a segue into sort of, you know,
what's happening now is, you know, you could have that experiential moment in the past, but now, and I don't see very many examples of it being done well. It can just continue on, right? So once you've left, there's reasons why you continue to engage with that thing that you were interested in at the beginning. Yeah. What's your favorite example of that, yours or somebody else's?
Well, I'll respond to the first question, or the statement, which is, you know, we like to say that a good brand experience or brand engagement should have no expiration dates. And you should, and the way the consumer is now is that you kind of don't really know where your experience with that brand began. You know, so I mean, did you know about the Schuham toilets before you got there? Was it a sort of a, you know, a delightful discovery when you got there, or did you see it online? And did it get passed around to your friends? So I think that that's something that all good brands should be doing, is figuring out sort of how do you engage that consumer in a relationship where it's sort of like, it's a good friend. I can't remember the last lunch I had with somebody, but I know that I've had a lot of lunch experiences. And for us,
but most of the time they end. I mean, 99% of these things have a beginning.
They may
and
end but they may end in the physical sense, but they don't necessarily need to end in a digital sense.
What I'm saying is, but they still are. I don't think there's that many good examples of that engagement that continues on, and that's what I want to ask.
Well,
Schuham
Schuham developed the Sitter Squad app, right? So they kind of continued it. It wasn't exactly the Potty Palooza experience, but they created an app that shows you the best public bathrooms and wherever you are. Right, so it kind of does, but
it's the same campaign.
Yeah.
So I think that there's campaigns where the engagement isn't off strategy with the rest of the campaign. But are there examples that you've seen where people they don't even know where they first engaged? They may have first engaged online and then they went to an event or then they experienced something, but that just continued on.
Well, one
it
example.
Kept giving. I think the thing that's hard is for it to keep giving. At some point, the brand maybe has nothing left to give and people are out.
Unless it becomes a useful utility in your life.
Yeah.
And the one that I think you and I might have discussed at one point is the North Face Snow Report iPhone app. And I think that's a really interesting case study, and we look at it all the time because you may have shopped at a North Face store, you may be online at North Face, you may have gone to a North Face sponsored event, but really something that lives with you. And for me as a skier and a rider, that's become not just a useful tool, it's become an absolute part of my repertoire. I don't make a decision on where I'm going to ski that weekend until I've looked at that app. And
I don't have that app.
Yeah, you should probably get it.
So it's pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're welcome, North Face.
It's turned into a commercial for North Face.
But it is a brand, and I think that that's a great example of the relationship with that brand continuing on and on and on, well past whatever that physical engagement might have been with that brand.
Yeah.
So it gives snow reports. I just want to stay on this because
let's do it.
So it gives snow reports.
I don't have my phone with me.
And because the problem with most snow reports is they come out too late. Right? It's like after the first chair is gone everywhere, they'll tell you who got what.
Right.
But they tend to hold that information. Is this thing come out like?
It's real-time information. It's tied to the ski resorts, and most of the ski resorts.
But the resorts hold.
They're getting much more sophisticated about that. I mean, think about Vail, and think about when
we care about skiing here.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
We probably should talk about something else because some people don't care about skiing.
Okay.
So what's your favorite?
That's a good question. I mean, I do like Potty Palooza, and I do like Sitter Squat because
what's your second
I need
favorite?
to use bathrooms. From a digital physical bridge, there is this thing about when you have an experience, there is a mnemonic that is given to you, whether it's like a photo or a video that you take and you put on your own social platform and you disseminate it.
Yeah.
Camp Jeep used to do a great job at that, and it's basically it's only for Jeep owners. And you go to this Camp Jeep, and you can take your Jeep or a loaner, and you go over boulders and whatnot, and they have an in-car cam.
Yeah.
They give you the little CD right after you do it.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this was awesome, and you tell all your friends about it. And you share it, exactly.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's and it's simple. Photo marketing is like a mainstay of any professional sports event. And it's kind of cool because
it's got a name now, huh?
Photo marketing? Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, sit there, you get someone that puts a jersey on you.
Yeah.
But it's like for kids, for instance. I mean, you see that on their on their shelves all the time. You have their little Little League trophy, and then you have the time they went to the game, and they got the little little photo album.
One of the questions that got tweeted in was, is the Apple Store experiential marketing?
I think so. I don't think the Apple Store is experiential marketing. I think the Genius Bar is experiential marketing.
Okay.
And it's because it delivers on the promise that Apple is a people-first company, and allows you the opportunity to talk to people rather than India or a machine or whatnot, and allows you to stay there as long as you want until your questions are answered. And that becomes a very high level experience for people
Yeah.
that they'll remember for a long time. And like the Apple Store in Soho is like the #1 pickup spot in New York. People go there to cruise. They don't go there to shop.
So it is experiential.
Oh, it's
marketing.
experiential.
In your experience,
yeah,
of
exactly.
experiential marketing.
In my mind, but I think
you
it
did
is.
it to meet girls originally. That's how I got involved.
I
I
did.
think that's great.
I did. Blue shirts are experiential. A lot of people think that it's just customer service
Yeah.
or retail service, but it's experiential when you talk to people.
But how do you do customer service without talking to someone?
There's a lot of times you
Robots.
go into robots
Yeah.
or people who don't care.
There's checkout robots.
Right.
Those are not a great experience.
Self-serve.
Do you like those?
Checkout robots.
No, there's self-serve things. Yeah.
I never go to them.
They're-
I don't. It takes longer.
Someone's going to do that really well though, so that it's actually better than a person.
Right.
Someone hit a button by accident.
Sweet. Awesome.
Those are people hitting buttons.
One day robots are going to take over the world.
Take away all his buttons. He's like, don't talk about the robots taking over the world. Cut in. The Matrix fights back.
But those. There's this. I think like 3-4 years ago, there was this whole revolution in retail where RFID chips embedded in all the products, so you just like walk through a scanner and you never have to go through checkout again. Yeah, that's the first store that does that. Is the most experiential store ever.
Yeah.
Because you've literally revolutionized the way you shop. And that's a piece of digital technology that probably increases the experience.
Yeah, I know when we changed the Domino's online ordering and put the pizza tracker in there and made it look like you were actually making a pizza. All the scores went up to the point where they were better than if you called the regular person.
Right.
And that's what I think has got to happen with those kind of checkout machines. There's a way to make it really delightful, but now it's extremely robotic, and they even choose a voice that's sort of annoying. Put items in bag.
Totally. Replace item.
Replace
item.
Like what they should do is they should take the script that they've given the machine and then have a person just say it to them and see how it feels.
Right.
That would be a good test.
Right.
This feels so terrible. I hate your store now. And then they wouldn't have to later get data like people hate us.
Yeah.
We don't understand.
To do it.
Why don't more people? The same question was, why don't more people do that kind of experiential thing like the Genius Bar that you're talking about? Rob, you want to take this?
Why don't more people?
Why don't more people do it? That was a question. If you want to just say, I don't know, that's a fine answer.
I'd rather make something up.
Okay,
Just
go.
gotta go off the cuff.
Sweet.
But I can tell you why I think Apple does it, and then sort of work back into why other people probably just can't do it, and that's because they are vertically integrated. So from literally concept into the consumer's hands, they own the entire process.
Right.
And I think a lot of brands are hampered by all the retail channels that sit in between them and the consumer.
Yeah.
And it's just very difficult.
They can't curate an experience.
That's
basically.
right. And I think that's a great way of putting
because
it.
because there are too many pieces out of their hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And whereas Apple can curate because it is a complete experience.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you see more people working towards that ability to curate all aspects? I mean, it's tough because we're coming out of a phase and maybe continuing with that phase where it's all about partnership. Nobody does all of anything anymore. And you could say Apple's the last of a concept, and there will be no more, or it's the new model.
Well, I think that's where also the power of experiential kind of comes in, because Apple does control that experience in a very vertical fashion, and a lot of brands don't. And so what you do is you sort of inject kind of that experiential marketing into the whole process and the whole relationship with the consumer, and suddenly you are being in touch with the brand. It's not quite as clean and as focused as the Genius Bar.
Yeah.
But for us, I mean, we do a lot of automotive marketing, for example, and we wish we had the power to close the sale on the spot, and we don't. We're constantly saying to the brands that we work with, can we just sell this car right now?
Yeah,
automotive. Can we sell this motorcycle right now?
Automotive is really tough because
It's
the dealer
hard.
rules.
Right,
Yeah, and dealer agreements, but you also have retailer agreements that are challenging as well. And we also work with footwear brands that it's the same kind of thing. We've only just recently begun to be able to actually make sales on the spot. So we have the consumer in the experience, whether it's physical, whether it's digital or whatever, and in that moment where they're making that decision to love you and sort of extending that love into a purchase, it's like, let's do it. You know, it's
that's gotta be crazy frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know,
for the consumer too.
I think the other element of
sort of like, I love you. Okay, here's
I'll
the
see you
coupon,
later. Yeah.
and now you're gonna have to walk to the store,
right.
drive to it,
and then I love you. I'm gonna go back to my apartment. If you're still interested, you should drive over. Here's the address.
And then you sit there and you go, coupon redemption is under 5%. Gee, I wonder why.
Well, that's also an element of tracking or metrics. You know, it's hard to put a kind of a quantifiable number on experiences and how it leads to sales, unless you close that sale and you can check that one off.
Right.
So that's why I think digital tools, you know, what we have in our pocket is becoming more instrumental to experiential, is because there's an action that you can actually influence right there on the spot, whether it's a click, whether it's a hand raise, whether it's a whatever, that's easily trackable. Because how do you track an experience? You know, like I can track a spot and how many viewerships I get and how that relates to the store sales in that market.
What percentage of experiences that you're doing include people with handhelds?
It should be 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
For us, it almost is 100%.
Yeah. Because before that, how would you get any metrics? You would interview each of your folks to get, you know.
The dumbest way is a coupon, and you're hoping that they punch in a code on it or something that you know that tracks it right back to that physical aspect. But that's so unsexy, you don't even want to do it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Are you using iPads in any of this stuff?
I think iPads are going to be incredible.
Has anyone designed just a way to hold it? You know, like I was thinking about it. The rent-a-car, you know, when you drop off your car, they've got those custom versions of the same sort of thing.
Right.
And you know, they've got a nice handle. The only thing you need is just some sort of handle on the back of that. I'm going to make it, or someone else will make it faster.
Yeah, you need those suction shower things. You know?
It's something where you can hold on to it so you can manipulate the device and not do, because it's not easy to hold.
Yeah.
If you're trying to work.
Computer T-shirts that
there
they
you
wear
go.
with the screens in the chest.
And you would work on your own
chest.
chest.
Walk in, you punch in everything.
Oh, on a person?
On a human being. It's awful.
That exists?
It exists and it's awful.
So well, I don't understand. Like an ATM person, I would like punch in my stuff and they would hand me money? What is it?
So glad I started this tangent.
Yeah, let's not go anywhere with that.
But I will tell you that the iPad we just used for a couple of events, and we almost lost the brand because of the iPad, because everybody was so fascinated about the iPad technology that it was sort of like
people were leaning in, looking like, what are you using there? Instead of
exactly. And no, this is an X brand event.
Right.
So.
But I left you. Both you guys got off the hook on like 3 things that make a good experience. I don't know if you realize you kind of both changed the subject.
We did.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Let's come back to that.
Well, you know, I mean, but you're asking questions that any client would be asking. You know, if they wanted.
So you must have an answer.
Well, isn't everything based on trust? You know, like trust and a leap of faith. But I think when the metrics comes into play, you're going to have a better case study. I think when people start, like from an Apple Genius Store example, or what some of the things that Procter & Gamble is doing in terms of marketing as service and service as marketing, you're going to get to see more and more brands start going, yeah, I want to do a little bit of that. But at the end of the day, you really need to have a client that believes in changing people, or you know, in changing outlook and really getting down at the grassroots level. And if you don't have that client, if they don't believe in it, then it's a really tough sell. Then you're going in the middle of the road with the experiences that you want to create, rather than the great experiences that you want to create.
Yeah. You got maybe closer to an answer with utility. No, I'm just, you know,
not that much.
No. You take it.
We should work on it. We should work on 3 things we tell our clients. But utility is probably the most you can hope for, is to actually create a utility. But I would think that going into every project, I would approach it saying, okay, why is the consumer going to be excited that this brand is interacting with this event or this moment, and design something so that eventually the consumer knows that every time I see that brand, I know sort of how they're going to interact with this moment because they're going to use their brand filter to do that. So you use their brand filter, and then each time it will create a new utility or augment the existing utility that we began at other events. And I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean
I used to be good at advertising.
Yeah, here. No, but I think that's the holy grail. You know, a brand that popped in my head that does experiential extremely well and built their entire business on it is Red Bull. You know, up until maybe 2 years ago with the Red Bull Gives You Wings stuff. But you know that every single event that you go to that's a Red Bull event, you expect the same thing. You expect to be delighted, wowed, and you get the product, you liquid to lips, as they say in the business.
And they're not going to do football. Right. I mean, the brand filter is clear. And so when they show up, on a guy who's got a jetpack, you're like, well, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And they sample a ton. And they started out just giving samples to bartenders. Yeah. Who actually need it.
Have you ever tasted Red Bull?
It's disgusting.
It's terrible.
Horrible.
It's terrible. It's just the worst thing ever. It is exactly like medicine.
It is.
You couldn't, if it said medicine on it, if you got it in a prescription, you could not get people to drink it. Yeah. I'm confident of that.
But they probably said the same thing about Dr. Pepper back in the day. And it's something
well, actually, some of those, the Coke and Dr. Pepper, those were medicines.
They were, exactly, yeah.
So they didn't even have to say that.
Which goes back to like way original question you had about, how far back does experiential go? But like they used to sell Coke out of, wagons in the Old West, and Schick razors used to be barkers on, the snake oil salesmen. Yeah. That was the way to sell new products back in the day. And I think Coke and Dr. Pepper probably did the same. You add a little cocaine into it, probably helped it, but
it kicks it off. Yeah, it gets things going. But at some point, they had to take it out, and they still were able to sell it.
It's true.
If it was ever in there. Yeah. You can tweet some questions to us at FearLessQA. We're talking with Max Lenderman, who is an expert and author in experiential marketing, and Rob Schuham, who's my neighbor. Who
and knows nothing about experiential.
who also is an expert in experiential marketing, and it looks like you need a little powder.
Do I?
A little shine. A little shine. Yeah. We don't really use makeup here. It's we keep it completely real.
It's my doing my skin.
You probably rode your bike here.
Probably.
Yeah. You have written recently about Russia and oligarchs and all that kind of stuff. And how'd you get to writing about? I don't even know what any of that means. Can you explain a little bit?
Well, an oligarch is one of those ungodly rich guys that made their money selling nickel.
Why do they have to give it a new name then?
I don't know. It's Greek, and
what's the difference between like bazillionaire and oligarch?
Probably because they control the government. Ah. That's what it is. They got a direct line.
So what's the difference between a bazillionaire and an oligarch?
That's a good question. Yes. Yeah, good one. Yeah. But I love this vodka. It's called Russian Standard, and it's the #1 vodka in Russia, and it's actually coming. I'm sure if you go back to Miami, there's a huge billboard on it. What I love about it is a couple of things, but first thing is their label is in Cyrillic. It's in Russian. It's not even in English, which is like whoa. You know, how do you get that? But the guy started, and everyone loved this vodka, and then the government...
So you have to know it's Russian Standard, because it doesn't say Russian Standard.
It doesn't say Russian Standard.
Yeah. I mean, to us it does.
Right, right, exactly.
Or to you it does.
To me it does, a little bit. And, Russia. The whole alcoholism thing. But so
I can read it.
I know what this is.
One more drink and I can read it.
Say with tequila. But they had an outlaw on alcohol. And so this guy basically was out of business overnight. Putin said, no more alcohol advertising. So what this guy did is he started Russian Standard Bank, right? And it was the exact same advertising. It was like a hot girl in the mountains, snowy mountains, like in a bikini. And it just said, instead of Russian Standard Vodka, it said Russian Standard Bank, right? And all the Russians, because of all the years of like the wink, wink, they got it right away. Yeah. And this is the #1 bank in Russia now. He makes more money on his bank than he does on his vodka. Right, and it's that type of thing. And this guy's like, I can do whatever I want, and he did it. And I've admired that vodka ever since I took money out of an ATM in Moscow.
I gave my assistant a blank check yesterday to Boulder County Courthouse to pay for a title on the car, and I was kind of sure that in a month I'll be driving by and there'll be a bar called Boulder County Courthouse. And we joked about it, you know. I'm like, I know how to cash this.
Don't
Boulder County Courthouse LLC.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would be a patron.
I do.
Of your
Me-
fine
me too.
establishment.
Where are you, honey? I'm at the Boulder County Courthouse.
Again.
Be home in an hour. Yeah.
There's a long line.
Got here 5 hours ago. Don't oligarchs eventually just get jailed once they get too powerful?
Right, when they get too powerful, or they have to
It's a
move to
s-
London and buy a
Right.
soccer team.
Like, it's a scary. I remember years ago we were talking about opening a CPB in China, and talking to different people about what it's like to work in the country, and experts. And I was sitting with this one guy, and he's like, and then once every 2 or 3 months we'll meet at a border in the south of China, and we'll get the money out, and that'll. And I just was like, I'm out. Right? Being in a Chinese prison,
Yeah.
not on my list of things to do.
Yeah.
In fact, number one on things to avoid.
Might be second only to a Russian.
So
president.
maybe, but I was gonna say, like, I would not be willing to do business in places where if the winds change, you go to jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that scare you? Do you think you're gonna ever wind up in a Russian prison?
I hope not. But
I shouldn't have even brought this up.
It's certainly possible. It's totally possible.
You're going through the list of things you've done, and you're like, it could have
happened. It probably, they probably should have. But but at the same time, it's one of those. I think anywhere you go in the developing country, in the developing world, you have that risk.
Yeah.
That anything that is breakthrough is going to be looked at suspiciously by the people who are devoted to keeping the status quo. And so the moment there is any type of newness to what's going on in the society and the culture, you're going to get a really watchful eye.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people don't go into Russia. Don't go into China. Don't want to do money transactions on the border.
On the border.
Yeah.
So we have just a little bit of time. Some words of advice for students that are breaking into advertising and want to get into experiential advertising.
Think twice. I mean,
Exactly.
think twice. What can I say?
It's harder than advertising.
It is. I mean, it's
Harder than regular advertising?
I think so, because it's a moving target. The thing about
Advertising's been really.
No, but
Static.
I'll put it this way: like, if you do a spot, for instance, you create the spot, you write the spot, you shoot the spot, you produce it, and you put it out.
Yeah.
You're done. You're on to the next thing. You do an experiential campaign where you have to hit 20 markets for 3 weeks or 3 months. Every day is a new campaign.
Yeah.
Every day is fraught with new stuff, and it's a people business, and people are unpredictable, and things happen, and weather changes.
But beyond the hard part, so they're unconvinced that they don't want to do it. How do they break in? That's really what everyone wants to know now. Like, how do I get a job?
So at
how do I get a
AG,
job with you?
We're all about internships, and that's really where it all starts. And it's all about getting experience. And if you go to a good agency that has a really strong internship program, and so what if you're stretching banners and picking up trash at the event? That's how you do it.
Yeah.
So it's important. And I think the other part of it is that there's a lot of great
Internships are the new first job.
They are the new first jobs, for sure. We pay. I don't know if
You pay interns.
we pay interns.
It's outrageous.
I know. Isn't it ridiculous?
We do too.
Sometimes we buy them lunch.
Wow. Yeah. We let them like drink the product we're sampling. Great.
Absolutely. But I was going to say that there's a lot of really great experiential talent out there right now.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder to break in, but it's not. It's certainly not.
If people apply themselves, I've never seen someone not get in if they just keep
Yeah.
going at it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I want to thank you guys for being on.
Pleasure. Thanks, man.
Thanks for dropping in like that.
Sure.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was delightful. I was
Yeah.
just trying to get a cold drink out of your fridge.
Yeah, we don't have a fridge, so good luck with
There you
that.
go.
Thanks for watching another Fearless. We'll see you next week, where we'll have more exciting guests. No, we don't have credits this week. Just put that thing.